We're looking at the running backs today, and we'll preface this, Corey, by saying, based on what I remember going into last season, it looked like Iowa was going to have a very interesting three-headed monster at running back and be very formidable at the position. And then, of course, Kaleb Johnson separated himself. And before we move on to the prospectus for 2025, if you can kind of give us some thoughts on how historic the Kaleb Johnson season was. I think our evaluation of his play going into the season was he had all sorts of talent. He showed it in spurts. He had solid games and so forth. He was a very good running back, but there was something not quite there. And he certainly found his groove, his gear, and just became a dominant running back. And if the team success would have matched what you and I forecasted, maybe he gets a trip to New York City.
Maybe. I think it's always an uphill battle as a running back. But the other problem is he went up against a guy, albeit at a different level, over at Boise State that just turned heads every week and put up insane video game-like numbers. But, yeah, I mean, you weigh him against some of the better backs of the Kirk Ferentz era. We've had this discussion. He's either one or two, right? It's either Sean Green or it's Kaleb Johnson. Sean Green's the only other running back who's had consistent NFL success at Iowa under Kirk Ferentz. Obviously, Liddell Betts had some NFL success. Tyler Kudzin's had a cup of coffee in the league. I don't know if this was last year. This is Kaleb. You're looking at Kaleb's numbers from last year. For a career, Kaleb finished with almost 2,800 yards, which eclipsed Tyler Goodson's 2,600 yards. It's actually not as big of a difference as you would expect. Now, Goodson was here 2019 to 2021. So technically, if you're looking at it from that perspective, 3 years versus 3 years, the difference is, and I'm not saying this is credit to Tyler Goodson for kind of being more productive at an earlier age than Kaleb was. Kaleb was really not playing a ton early on. He played some, but he split a lot of carries with Jazz Patterson, with Le'Shawn Williams. It wasn't until this year that he became an all-world back. If he had even just 2 seasons, like he decided to come back next year, Mark, he'd have blown these numbers off the chart. So as it stands, certainly if you want to compare individual seasons, it's been a long time. Again, at least Sean Green, since we've seen something like that. Akram Wadley actually finished with more rushing yards, but again, took him longer to get there. He finished with over almost 2,900 yards. Other guys that are even vaguely close. Mark Weissman finished with 2,600 yards during his career over a 3-year span. Jordan Canzeri eclipsed 2,000. LaShawn Daniels, 1,900. Marcus Coker, boy, his career could have been something. What a year he had in 2011, and his career was cut short of injury. He's one of those what-if guys that maybe he would have been. His style was somewhat similar to Tyler Goodson, kind of a longer-bodied, long strider type of back, and his career was cut short due to injury. Adam Robinson was promising. He had some issues. He had some off-the-field issues, and was at Iowa very briefly for a 2-year stretch. And then you get back into Sean Green. Albert Young obviously had huge numbers, put up over 3,000 yards over a longer span of time during his career at Iowa. And Fred Russell, obviously his nephew Jalen Watson's a DB on the Iowa roster. And then Liddell Betts put up ridiculous numbers over the course of his career, over 3,600 yards. And Tavian Banks, if you want to go back into the Fry era. So that's Kaleb's certainly for an individual season. He's right there with anybody and everybody. And, Sean Green carved himself out a nice career with the Jets, with the Titans. I wouldn't say, certainly he wasn't an all-pro or a Pro Bowl type of back, but shelf lives are so short for running backs. I don't think anybody can blame Kaleb for leaving when he did. Especially at any position nowadays, you got to be able to make money when you do with football. But for his situation as a running back, given the season he's coming off of, and there's some question marks up front because they had a lot of experienced guys. You wouldn't want to come back with a younger offensive line, have your numbers dip and take a hit in your draft stock. So Yeah, they got a lot. They got big shoes to fill in, but it's going to be a running back by committee approach unless somebody emerges, and I don't know who that would be. They don't have the physical specimen that Kaleb Johnson was. But as you mentioned earlier, they didn't. He had not showcased himself as a do it all back, as a trademark, Madden type of back until this past season. It's like the people they just ripped me through the first 2 months of the season because I had Kamari Moulton as my top running back. It's like, so did Iowa. Okay. Whether you want to believe the depth chart or not, he was number one on the depth chart, and Kaleb Johnson had not shown anything to be, made. How much backlash there would have been had he manifested himself as the number one back through his first couple of seasons. People would have been up in arms had they seen somebody else atop the depth chart heading into year 3, but they weren't. So, guys, maybe that's a testament to Liddell Betts. Certainly the hard work that Kaleb Johnson put in during the offseason paid off, and maybe they'll get somebody with a similar trajectory that's on the roster right now.
As we see there, Corey did a nice job without any notes of running down the career rushing leaders at Iowa. Cedric Shaw on top, and we see if Kaleb Johnson would have come back and rushed for roughly 1,100 yards, then he would have become the all-time rushing leader, and 5.5 yards per carry is certainly impressive.
Yeah, how about Davian Banks, 6 yards a carry? That's a nuts number, right? Over the course of his career, 6 yards per carry. Sean Green was 5.9. Those are, but again, we're talking all-time greats, right? I mean, between Tavian, I got to get Tavian. Tavian was on a show with me here a year or two ago. I got to get him back on. I know he's offered to come on, and he'd be a great conversation. We could get him on this show. He still lives here in the state of Iowa, as far as I'm aware. Mark Fetter, there's a name.
Yeah, see, when you get these all-time lists and you've got these databases that can just generate everything now, it's not manually done by some dude that's just racking up the first 10 or 15. It's just funny to go down. They got everybody who's ever gained a yard, I assume, here in the history of Iowa football. Yes, all the way down to, we're going to run into Spencer Petras here if they go into the negatives, I guess.
Deacon Hill. You're going to find some Deacon Hill on there. I don't know that you're going to see.
Cooper DeJean's got 8 yards.
I think he had one. Didn't he have one? Didn't Cooper DeJean have one carry? I think he got one carry on offense. Yeah.
There it is.
Sam Laporta, they used him as a Wildcat quarterback. Look, he's on there. Two carries for 6 yards. That's about the dumbest thing Brian ever.
Right?
That's the dumbest thing Brian ever did.
That.
Yeah, that was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. Anyways, now think about how good he is. Now he is a Pro Bowl tight end. Imagine if they had used him in a meaningless bowl game and he got hurt. How dumb would that have been? But anyways, you want to jump to this year, Mark?
Yeah, let's get into
the guys
it.
In there. Fun
and
group.
We will pull up last year's stats and check out, starting with Kamari Moulton. How would you compare him as a back versus Kaleb Johnson?
Oh, there's just nobody. Like I said, there's nobody on the roster that you can compare to Kaleb with Kaleb's size and stride. Now, I think he's got more wiggle. I thought Kaleb really improved in that regard, but he's never going to be your zigzag type of back. But certainly Kamari is in line for a lot more as it relates to touches. He had 500 yards this last year. It's not a bad number when you look at the colossal amount of volume that Kaleb Johnson got from week 1.5, because he got suspended week 1 to the end of the year, end of the season. So I would probably give him the nod to be the starter. I really like the upside of Jazz Patterson. I just don't know what the coaching staff doesn't see in practice, because he had fallen off the depth chart for a while toward the end of fall camp. He did suffer an injury at one point, then finally worked his way back into the rotation. But this is the second straight year where I thought they're going to have somebody leave. Now, they could still leave, but we're talking spring ball. We're talking battle and heading into spring practice. So assuming those guys are both healthy, but they're both going to have an opportunity to battle and see who comes out on top. And then maybe one of them leaves at the end of spring ball. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think there's enough carries to go around. And I think that if they were going to leave, then they would have left probably during the cycle in December, because that's the hotter cycle, a hotter window to enter. But I think those two guys could be a really nice complement of one another. They're not as stark in difference as we saw with Kaleb versus anyone and everyone else. And then it'll be interesting to see how Terrell Washington factors in to what Tim Lester wants to do, because they line him out wide a lot and kind of use him like a Swiss Army knife in a sense. We'll see how much. I think they're going to probably burn him across the line of scrimmage, or boundary to boundary, pre-snap. And, same thing with Brevin Dahl. He worked some with receivers during this past season and leading into the season. I love his speed. He was coming off a broken leg his true freshman season, and I know he was still turning heads. He's said to be the fastest guy on the team, even faster than Caden Weegan, which is something, because Caden Weegan is, he won the Returner of the Year award nationally. And what a blessing it is to have him back, not only with the special teams group, but also receiver play, maybe get him factored into things. So, yeah, they got some intriguing guys. I like Brevin Dahl from a perspective of his speed and, his speed. And, you watch it now, high school aside, you got to kind of weigh this. And he played at a good level of high school football in Iowa. But you don't see too many guys that pair speed with the center of gravity that I see Brevin Dahl play with, at least at the high school level. Now, again, how much will that translate? I have not. You don't see that often. It's usually one or the other. Even with Kaleb Johnson, he had this. I shouldn't say he didn't have speed, but Brevin Dahl's also got the quickness, I think, that maybe even Kaleb lacks. Now, whether that translates as a running back in the Big Ten level, we'll see. But he's an intriguing one. And then the other guy that's intriguing because of his size in a different way than Kaleb Johnson would be Xavier Williams. He's just got tree trunks for legs. He'll be a redshirt freshman out of the Chicago area, and a really nice kid who turned our heads in the media. I know sitting there at Kids Day, the open practice in August last summer, really turned heads. He's a hard guy to bring down. So, you just have different types of backs, and I think the ideal is to find your do-it-all type of guy, which ended up being Kaleb Johnson. I didn't know that he'd ever reach there. He certainly did, but they haven't had a lot of those. It's been either lightning or thunder under Kirk in most years. It's been either Tyler Goodson, Akram Wadley, or LaShawn Daniels. Trying to think of another example. Who's another big bruiser that they've had? Brandon Wager. I'm sorry, Brandon Wager is probably a bad example. I was going to say Mark Weissman. Would be a good example of that. So they had a guy a couple of years ago who slips my mind, but who was working with? It was Ivory Kelly Martin, Akram Wadley, and then who was the third guy? Somebody will tell me. 2017, Gavin Williams. That's the one I was thinking of. He was the bruiser.
Yeah,
and he's had a good career, by the way, at Northern Illinois since he transferred. So, and then am I missing anybody in that room?
What happened to LeSean Williams?
Transferred to Kansas, I believe. He was committed to either Kansas or Memphis, and then he flipped to the other one. I think he's going to Kansas. I think he was originally committed to Memphis. Don't quote me on that. So, Mekhi Sargent. Hey, Thor Williams brings up Mekhi Sargent.
Yeah.
He was a good do-it-all back, and he was a guy I did not expect to become that. He transfers from the JUCO ranks. He was really good in 2020. Really good. They could use a guy like that. I haven't brought up Nate McNeil. He's a freshman. We've seen young backs come in and play right away, whether it be Tyler Goodson, even Akram Wadley, Kaleb Johnson, Jazz Patterson. So he's another guy. He's not going to be here in the spring. I'm sorry. He did enroll in the spring. Now that I think about that, he did enroll early. More and more guys enrolling early. You've talked about how Iowa's kind of been behind as it relates to getting guys on campus early. So he is there. So that's interesting. I don't know the last time Iowa had a running back enroll early. They may have had one, and I'm just forgetting. Terrell Washington, I think, did. I think TJ did. But he's a guy who has decent size. He's not as small as Kamari Moulton was out of high school. He's a Florida back, so he's someone that Liddell Betts obviously thought very highly of, and he's had success down there. Jazz Patterson's a Florida kid. I believe Kamari is a Florida kid, if I'm not mistaken. I know Terrell Washington's Texas, but it'll be interesting to see big group of kids competing, and he's the only running back they bring in this class.
If I remember correctly, Jazz Patterson the game that he caught my eye was 2 years ago against Iowa State. They
Yeah,
needed him in the fourth quarter. He put the game away. He and the offensive line, he really gained a lot of yardage off tackle, just carry after carry.
yeah, and he had the big run in the first half on the counter play that really busted that thing open. And points are always hard to come by in that game. That's been illustrated in recent time. By the way, Kelvin Fisher brings up Torrin Young was the guy I was trying to think of in
Oh,
2017.
yeah.
There's another big bruising type of back. So that's why I say they typically had one or the other, and sometimes they complement one another. Maybe that'll happen this year. Maybe it'll be a Kamari Moulton and Xavier Williams. Maybe he'll emerge, or maybe it'll be a couple of freshmen emerge. Maybe they'll lose somebody like an older player, Kamari or Jazz, and then a couple of freshmen emerge. That's possible. May the best guy win. But I do like the skill, like Aiden brings up, Kamari Moulton's skill. I think because he and Jazz, one thing they do is they both run with authority. I think they both have excellent vision. I think Kamari's maybe a little bit more patient than Jazz is, but Jazz just runs he's just like a bowling ball. He's just, no matter where he's at, he's a guy that if he could have a big year, go make some money in the league right away, because he's going to have some problems staying healthy when he gets a little older running like that. But both guys have flashed.
One of those comments coming in from Facebook, simulcasting on Twitter/X, also simulcasting on Facebook.
We love you, Kent. We love you, Kent.
Yes,
Share it
Kent.
with your friends on Facebook. Mark's trying
Absolutely.
to expand the Facebook reach.
Let's expand all over the place.
I have
into new territories.
I have a question for Kent, because I see Kent's the one who commented on Facebook. Mark has done a phenomenal job building this channel over the past 4 years. But if you could share this stream on any and every page that you're a part of, group that you're a part of, to get the stream out and people can watch right there via Facebook. They don't have to leave Facebook. I think people would really enjoy being able to listen to this on the way back from work, or maybe they just got home and they're getting ready for dinner. They're putting the kids to I don't know. Kids take naps in the late afternoon. Whatever the case may be, it's a good time to put on the stream and listen to it. Maybe you cast it on your smart TV or your smart speakers. So many ways to listen when you're on Facebook and YouTube, and you can do it all.
I'll give a quick example from one of our other team channels of what's possible, because our Facebook page at the Voice of College Football is limited. A couple hundred people. We were at a couple thousand. We had Facebook issues. So anyway, we don't do much with it. We want to get it jump started. But we did a Florida State show. And a few years ago, we used to have one of the analysts start to share it. He said, you want me to share this to my Facebook groups and so forth. Suddenly, like I checked the Iowa live stream that we did here last week that I shared and streamed on Facebook for the first time. I had like 35 views, what you would expect for a first time. And that's what the Florida State show would do. When he shared, now he belonged to a bunch of Florida State Facebook groups. He was a former player. When he shared that thing, we got 8,000 views on Facebook.
Yeah. There's a lot of Hawkeye fans that they don't do anything but Facebook. Just like there's a lot of Hawkeye fans that don't do anything but YouTube. So if people want to have, it's always more fun when you have a lot of people sharing opinions. And it's a lot. By the way, I'll put a promo in for you. I'll put a promo in for my channel. There's a lot of fun stuff coming on my channel over from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So we got some great people we're working with, and Chloe in the chat says lots of Hawkeye fans out in South Carolina as well. So maybe Chloe can get all the Hawkeye fans. She can just take the state of South Carolina and tell them all about it. So
absolutely. So let me ask you this about this batch of running backs. Have you seen enough to differentiate whether there's an advantage, A, from a pass receiving standpoint with any of these guys, or B, as pass protectors, which obviously sometimes from a fan perspective gets dismissed, but from a coaching standpoint, extremely important, of course, to protect the quarterback?
I know Jazz looked, there was a play just flashed through my mind. Now, consistency is another story. My short answer to you is no on number one, maybe on number two. But again, without combing through film, I wouldn't be able to tell you right now, is Kamari or is Jazz the better of the two as it relates to blitz pickup and and pass catching. But I know there was at least one play against Iowa State where Jazz took out two Iowa State rushers 2 years ago, and that became like a really viral play in some regards. I think both guys have flashed in those regards. I don't think that's what held them back from getting more carries last year. It was just how electric Kaleb Johnson was with the ball. I think their room is in a really good place. And I think that's one thing that we're going to find out about this group is that although Kaleb Johnson was electric, and you could argue, well, he was the offense last year, it was year one under a new offensive coordinator and a new scheme. Bring in a better quarterback. We assume Mark Gronowski is going to be healthy by the time we hit fall camp. Knock on wood, he better be. But I just think you're going to see a better offense. So people think they're going to take a step back because Kaleb is gone. I understand where they're coming from. I think it's maybe not a naive approach, but just an uninformed approach because they've got a good room. They've got a solid room. Is it going to look different? Yes. Is there going to be more? Is there going to be more of an emphasis on the passing game? Yes, and that's a good thing because I think the passing game will be more equipped to be utilized heavier. But I also don't know that we're going to see that big of a drop with the running game. Now, my only caveat to that is I don't know yet who's playing left tackle, and I don't know yet who's playing the guard spot opposite of Bo Stevens. There's guys like maybe it's hey, we saw Cade Peeper flash. They obviously like him. Trevor Lauk is a young kid. We've talked about him. We'll preview the offensive line here at some point. Maybe he ends up being that left tackle, but I do believe that the offense is going to take a step forward even without Kaleb. Running back is not going to be the reason why they're if they somehow struggle, I don't think it'll be because of the running back room. I think if anything, it's going to be because of the offensive line, or they just don't get healthy at quarterback, at receiver. Yeah, those things. Assuming health is not an issue, the offense should take a step forward, and I think running back will be just fine. Maybe not as productive as having an first team all Big Ten guy, but it will be good. I think Liddell Betts has earned that trust from most people at this point.